Christopher Columbus statues are coming down in Hartford, New Haven, New London, and in other communities. All because in recent years, historians have debated whether Columbus is worthy of such memorials like statues. With us now from Quinnipiac University, history professor Phil Goduti. Professor Goduti, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on the show.
So we're hearing stories that Columbus was a murderer, among other things. Was he as horrible as people are making him out to be?
Well, this is a good question. And Columbus is really mixed with history and myth. And it's really difficult to know who the real Columbus was. We really only have a legacy to define his meaning in history. And that legacy has changed over time from a celebration of nationalism to a reckoning of how the nation was founded. So in order for us to truly understand who he was, it's all we can really rely on are the perspectives of others and the written record, and that isn't as accurate because it was so long ago.
Was he revered back in the 1700s when colonial children were in school and they were learning things? Were they taught about Columbus?
That's a great question, and that's actually why we celebrate him and why there's monuments to him. The revolutionary generation, in an effort to reimagine who they were in the wake of rebelling from the British, took up Columbus as a way to tie themselves to the old world, which is why we have our national capital called Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. They changed King's College over to Columbia University, and they started naming major cities Columbus. And that was an effort to tie not only the nation to the old world, but also to promote that the nation was supposed to be about exploring and free thinking. And the founders didn't want to prop themselves up because that would be undemocratic. So they found someone or an icon and actually used that instead.
You know, some of his defenders say that, well, he's accused of bringing smallpox and other diseases to the New World, but they say that all Europeans brought those things and that the indigenous people here just didn't have any immunity to them, correct?
That is correct. There's actually this great thing that I do with my students where we sort of ask the question, why wasn't it reversed? Why didn't the indigenous people bring disease back to the old world, for lack of a better term? And the reason why is Europe was immune to certain diseases, and the people here in what is now the United States and South America, they were not. And it wasn't only Columbus, it was the English, it was the French, it was anyone who came from the that part of the world and into this part of the world, and it was a part of the exchange. Whether it was intentional or not, that's where the revisionism comes in, and whether or not Columbus did it purposely.
So they're bringing down statues, but yet they're keeping street names. There's a Columbus Boulevard in Hartford. There's another one in New Britain. You mentioned Columbia University and all these other, Columbus, Ohio. Where do we go from here? Do you see these names changing?
It could. I mean, when you look at the history of the United States, first of all, I feel like we're in the midst of a revolution in itself, trying to understand who we are as a nation and reimagining the American identity. What does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be a part of the United States? And part of that narrative is what's going on around us right now. We're constantly changing who we are and how we address issues. We could change street names. We could even change Columbia University over to something else. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's indicative of the times that we are in right now. And we shouldn't disclude Columbus from the historical narrative. He still needs to be a part of where we came from, but it also needs to underscore where we're going and where we hope the United States will move from here, especially in light of everything that's happening right now.
It's difficult to predict the future, but as you look at other historical figures who are now being looked at in a different prism, Thomas Jefferson owned slaves, George Washington owned slaves. Do you see other historical figures perhaps facing the same consequences as Columbus is today?
I do, because once again, I believe that we are changing who we are as a nation, and that change is consistent within our whole history. And while we have a lot of bad in our history when it comes to certain people and certain events, we also have a lot of optimism and a lot of good things that we founded this nation on. And I think from all of this horrible tragedies that have happened in the last few weeks, it's my hope that as we move forward, we change how we do things. We change the historical narrative, and that's a part of history. That's what we're experiencing right now. We are in the throes of history. I've been saying this to my students, and we should pay attention. And we might be changing how we look at Washington and Jefferson, and that's okay. That's part of the narrative.
Do you see that happening, where perhaps Washington statues will be coming down and Jefferson statues will be coming down?
That's hard to imagine, and I only say that because Washington is he's a bigger icon than Columbus, in my opinion. And the irony of the whole thing is that Washington and Jefferson didn't want to be an icon at all. They actually were happy that Columbus was the person who everyone looked to. They felt it was undemocratic. They just wanted to be on their farms or where they lived and not pursue higher office, not do all those things. But we do look to them. We do have memorials. We do have statues. I don't know, to be honest with you, but I do think we're going to start to rethink how we talk about them. And I think that's important.
Your history classes are going to be fascinating in the future. Professor Phil Goduti from Quinnipiac University, we thank you so much for joining us today, and happy Father's Day to you, sir.
Thank you very much.
And we thank you all for watching Face the State on this Sunday. I'd love to see what you think about today's program. You can tweet me, find me on Instagram or Facebook. Enjoy your Father's Day to all the dads out there, including my own. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Have a great Sunday. CBS Sunday Morning with Jay and Pauly is coming up next.